What up everyone, Shark here. Today we're going to talk you through everything you need to know to get started in BrokenArrow and play your first couple multiplayer games. If you're new to the channel, welcome. I'm going to cover a wide variety of topics today, so there'll be timestamps in the description below. Feel free to jump ahead to any topic that piques your interest, or come back later if you need additional information. With that said, let's get to it, starting with settings. The first thing I recommend you do with any game is go in and validate your settings. Obviously, you're going to want to take a look at graphics. What I have noticed is that I didn't see any particular performance drop when I went from 1080p to 1440, but I did find a lot of value in setting the FSR to balanced for me. Obviously, you can get into a lot of different custom presets down below based on your own hardware. I'm running a 3080, and this setup works for me. The biggest thing, make sure full screen, update VSync based on your graphics card, update your frame limit based on your monitor, and then take a look at FSR. I find it made the gameplay a lot smoother, and you very rarely notice the FSR popping in and out. Next, I would just check your sound. The music at default is very loud. But finally, from a gameplay perspective, this is one thing I think everyone should do. If you go to gameplay, down to accessibility, and look at label colors, I highly recommend you switch this from default to custom, and then set your own colors. In this case, the reason I do this, and some players like having all of their enemies show up as flat red, I like having them in different colors because it helps me identify when me or one of my teammates is being double teamed or triple teamed, and it'll help you in more sweaty multiplayer games identify risk and reward there. So definitely take that setting, hit apply, and then roll back out to the main menu. Now, for the responsible among you, you're going to want to play the tutorial. It's a little simple, but it does do a good job of going over most of the basic mechanics in the game, especially move orders. To play a tutorial, click on campaign, and you'll see the first mission here called Showtime. Hit play mission. You can roll through the tutorial as many times as you like. For those of you who want to jump straight into a game though, I would recommend that you review the controls very briefly. As you can see here from this map from the playtest, it still holds true. WASD move the camera for you to allow you to move around. You scroll your mouse to zoom in and out, and then you've got the key movement commands. Right click for a direct move, double right click or F for a fast move that'll follow roads and ignore enemy actions, E to stop, hard reverse, and Q to attack move. There are a lot of other controls here. I'll go over those at a later time, but these are just the absolute basics to get into the game. For almost all of us, what you're going to want to do first is build a deck and experiment with the millions of customization options available for units in this game. It's a lot and it can be a little overwhelming, but it's also a ton of fun. So you're going to click Arsenal, go to Army Builder. For note, if you go to Armory, it'll show you everything in the game, but Army Builder is where you actually build a deck. You can see you're going to start with a Russian default deck and a US default deck. These are generally well balanced, but not the best, and you still want to know what's in them. Then you can build as many decks as you like, and it's up to you to choose a specialization in the exact loadout of the units. To make a new deck, click New Battle Group, choose a name, choose a nation, and choose 2 specializations. Now what's important here is each specialization has a different size component. So for example, US Special Operations have equal amounts of reconnaissance, infantry, helicopters, and aircraft, but no vehicles and no support available to them. So you might consider pairing that with something like Armored or Striker that'll give you access to vehicles and support, as well as additional infantry and reconnaissance choices. Note, Armored doesn't have any additional helicopters or aircraft, so this battle group is high on infantry, reconnaissance, and vehicles, and lower on support, helicopters, and aircraft. Then click Create, and it's time to get started. Now, as you get into building your deck, I find that there are 2 basic styles of decks in BrokenArrow. There are assault decks where you focus on pushing with heavy armor, vehicles, and support to take terrain, and there are support decks where you're less focused on terrain and more focused on supporting your teammates and knocking out the enemy's high-value units to get your destruction score really high. I will go through this deck and talk about basic deck considerations, and I'll give examples of good places, good fits for support decks and good fits for assault decks. All that said, there are going to be a million deck tutorials out there. I will do some of my own. This is just the basics to give you a well-rounded deck to get you started in the game as quickly as possible. Starting with reconnaissance, there are two basic kinds of reconnaissance units. You have ground-based reconnaissance units, and you have air-based or drone reconnaissance units. It's good to have a mix of both. Ground-based units can be very sneaky. You can keep them in cover or in buildings. You can use them on hold fire to make sure they don't give away their position, and they can slowly creep deep into the enemy's lines and spot for units like artillery or air attacks. They can also allow you to identify enemy pushes early. Drones see further but are much more vulnerable to anti-air fire. They're a really rapid response if you need to see what the enemy has overhead. It's worth noting though that most drones cannot change altitude to low altitude, so if you don't micro them well and keep them behind the front line, they will almost certainly get knocked out of the air by powerful anti-air units. Now let's talk about infantry. I generally group infantry into one of three categories: mainline/assault, anti-tank, and anti-air. Your mainline infantry, like in this case my rangers, are designed to assist with a vehicle assault and then immediately hold ground. They're good all-round units, but they will die if left unattended or exposed to heavy armor, heavy air attack. Elite infantry, like soft, like these Delta Force guys here, are basically a hard counter to your infantry. They hold a little bit better, but they also can't be left on their own or they will get smoked by heavier vehicles or air power. Your anti-tank infantry have an anti-tank specialization, so they're vulnerable to infantry, but they are better at holding ground against tank pushes. And your anti-air infantry, which are really valuable in dealing with enemy helicopters and aircraft and helping you hold terrain once you've gotten it. No matter whether you're doing a support deck or an assault deck, you should have a well-balanced force of reconnaissance and infantry to make sure that you can hold ground once you've taken it and support your armored pushes or your teammates. One additional thing to discuss right now, you can see these mech riflemen are tied to this Bradley. These Rangers of the Javelin are tied to this RSOV, but the Delta Force and Rangers are coming in on foot. In this game, you can use any infantry with any vehicle that they can fit in. So I can deploy these Rangers with this RSOV as long as I have the resources and both units are available. When you're building your deck, one of the ways to save room is to not assign every single one of your units to a vehicle. So in this case, I know I want access to RSOVs, I know I want access to Bradleys. I've tied them together in this build, but everything else can come in on foot. Likewise, with these reconnaissance units, I have Rangers, RRC coming in with the Silent Hawk, SCT coming with the Little Bird. That means I have all of those vehicles available to me as long as the unit itself can fit within that transport platform. It's available to use for infill. All right, now let's talk about vehicles. This deck is clearly set up an assault deck. As you can see, I basically have 5 fully advanced Abrams available to me. The other vehicles here, you could swap out as many of these as you want, but based on the specialization, in this case special operations, which has no vehicle choices, and armor, which has these heavy armored choices, I built this deck all around supporting these Abrams tanks as they enter the battle. It is worth noting that even though there's the initial value, putting additional armor packages on your units makes them much more resilient. I highly recommend, especially for your exquisite units, that you upgrade their armor package and their weaponry as much as possible. We'll talk a little bit more about the style of deck building and the value of quality over quantity in this game. I'll also have a video later where I talk about these armor ratings and how to better read this screen. One thing to note, if you want to compare vehicles, you click one, you click this pin button, and now if I click the second, I can see the primary differences in these tanks. So in this case, primarily additional armor for the SEP V3 and some additional penetration on its main gun, but that's largely it. You can treat these tanks as very much the same. So it might be worthwhile to have more of the SEP V2s versus SEP V3s. That is up to you. Just to show you what the vehicle column might look like more in a support deck, as you can see, I only have 500 points to play with here, and I've gone with a couple of M8 Thunderbolts with an upgraded gun and armor package. The thought process is here, these are more designed to build ambushes and hold terrain. I'm not trying to assault, I'm going to let my teammates do that. So I have these vehicles available to help hold ground, but you can see based on the armor, they're essentially glass cannons. They're better designed at ambush than they are pushing to take terrain from the enemy. Now taking a look at the support category, this is where your anti-air and indirect fire assets are going to live. But the ones that you choose will depend on the nature of your deck. In a support deck, you're probably going to focus on units like the Patriot Pack 2, which is a very high-end anti-air unit, a lot of range, a lot of damage, or high-end artillery units like the MLRS or the ATACMs. For an assault deck, you might want anti-air and artillery units that are a little bit more mobile. So think about the Paladin for indirect, the Pivads for close-in anti-air support against helicopters, or the linebacker, something that can move with your assault elements and provide them coverage from the front rather than the back line. All right, so now let's talk about helicopters. Helicopters have basically 3 roles in this game, and they're actually extremely strong right now, especially on the Russian side with some of their armor and the resilience to aircraft. You have helicopters like this AH-64, which is built out as an anti-tank, anti-vehicle platform, still very susceptible to infantry-based anti-air or vehicle-based anti-air, but if you can clear those threats out, these guys will come in and just absolutely mow down your enemy's tanks. I also have these DAPs set up as kind of an infantry clearing platform with their rockets. And then I have this MH-47. This is a dual purpose for me. I can use it to infill infantry based on its unit size, 32, so it can hold multiple squads. Or in this case, I can use it for cargo and resupply. It's very quick to bring cargo onto the field. However, you do need to be careful with it because if it gets shot down, you lose all of that cargo for resupply support. The other place where you normally see resupply units is in the support column here. You can see this tracked vehicle available to me here has 5,000 cargo capacity, but I don't have it in this deck. I'm entirely reliant on the helicopter for resupply. The last column here are your aircraft. Aircraft have a number of different roles in this game. In more of a support build, you're going to want bigger aircraft like the B-2 Spirit or the F-117 Nighthawk with air-launched cruise missiles with a nuke if you really want it, right? But the JASMs, the cruise missiles, allow you to provide a lot of fire support to your teammates. If you're in more of an assault role, you might want to equip Mavericks or Harms onto your jets to help with suppression of enemy air defenses or blowing up tank columns. This deck is actually just designed to provide me with a little bit of an answer to whatever the enemy has. I've got this F-22 in an anti-air build, and this F-35 in a suppression of enemy air defenses build with this Nighthawk with some cruise missiles in the back. This deck actually needs a lot of support from my teammates in terms of air because it is really built around supporting heavy pushes with tanks and infantry at the front. The last thing that I want to highlight is it's possible to share your decks. Your decks are saved. The path I'm going to display on the screen here and put in the comments below. It's unique to your computer, but you can copy and paste these decks. You can share them via Discord. One of the things that me and my friends have been doing is when we have a deck that's successful, we throw it in Discord so anyone else can use it with a description of the different units, why we have them, what their roles are. I find it super helpful and it's a really cool feature for this game. I realize that this is a very quick down and dirty overview of deck building. Decks are one of the best parts of this game. I highly encourage you to really dig in and customize your units. I will have a follow-up video in the next couple days talking about the different kinds of munitions and ways to outfit your aircraft and helicopters or your vehicles for specific roles. But that's enough on decks for now. Let's roll into how to get into a multiplayer match. All right, so you've reviewed the tutorial, you've got your first deck built, you want to go play. There are 2 basic options for multiplayer. One is just hit quick match right here. This is if you want a solo queue, you'll get matched up with randoms. As soon as you hit this, it'll start trying to connect you to a game. I don't want to play a solo queue right now, so I'm going to cancel that. If you want to play with a teammate though, you go to play here. You can see many lobbies available, so you can join one. You can see if they're private, if they're open. To create your own stack here, and you can do this with any number of players. You create a lobby, make sure it's set to standard, visibility to public or private. In this case, I'm going to set to private. You create this. Any of your friends on Steam can just join you from here. Let's say there are only 2 of you. You close these 3 slots. You get your second teammate in here. Make sure you check if you want mirror matches or not. Check what you want your friendly forces to be. And then once you are ready, in this case, I can't launch now, I can launch like this. My teammate joins in, he readies up. You can click launch from there. You can select a battle group up front. It's worth noting that you do not need to, but it's not a bad idea if the game lets you to go ahead and choose your deck up front, because it'll set it as default when you get further into the matchmaking sequence. One additional cool feature of this game to invite people, you go over here to this icon, click this. You can use it either for Discord style or for a plain URL invite link. You click that, it'll copy it to your clipboard. You can drop it into Discord, and as long as this lobby is still live, your teammates can join on you just based on that link rather than through Steam. So if you're trying to find teammates via Discord server and you're not Steam friends just yet, that's one of the best ways to do it. Once your teammates are ready and you launch, it goes into a search sequence, which I found has been really, really quick. A lot of people playing the game, it's easy to find a match, which is a nice change of pace from some of the other games that I play. Once you get in, you immediately go into a map voting process. The game will basically give you a choice of one of 3 maps. You and the other team will vote, and the map with the most votes will be the one that you play on. After that, your team and the other team will take turns choosing their specialization in their deck. What I would do here is have a couple of different decks. If you're not playing with a fully arranged team, if you're playing with only like one other buddy, or you're playing with randoms, take a look at the specialization that they have and choose your deck based on what you think they're going to be good at, or how you can support. If you're going to be an assault player or a support player. But if you notice, everyone has special operations and airborne. That means a lot of support, infantry, and air heavy builds. Might be a good idea to get some armor and some strikers on the field. Next, the game will give you a minute of a map overlay with your teammates to kind of outline how you want to play the map. If you're playing with randoms, you can use the icons on the map to indicate what positions you think you want to hold. Let's go for H, you and me.
Okay.
If you're playing with an arranged team, I highly recommend each piece of the team identifies an objective or a role. If you've got kind of assault versus support builds across the way, the support players typically play in the middle or paired up with an assault player, and you try to identify where you want to focus on the map. Identifying this at the beginning is really useful and really important in making sure that your team is working together, and we'll get into scoring here in a little bit. Next, you'll get 1 minute of a deployment phase. This is, you can actually select your units from the hangar and start to at least indicate where you want to deploy them. This can be another last opportunity to deconflict with your teammates. I don't have any helicopter stuff. This is my like super ground-based build. And here's where you're also going to plan out your air attacks. This is essentially the air units you're going to commit to the initial stage of the fight to try to either kill the enemy's air units or identify any helicopter airborne based insertions that you can knock out before they cease terrain. This phase, it depends on your playstyle, but I normally either pick an air or an anti-air unit to deploy immediately, followed by some reconnaissance units or some infantry to take and hold early terrain or key reconnaissance positions. But yeah, I'm going to pop the Patriots out. I'm going to try to get some infantry over there. I just don't have... I don't have it. I'm so used to playing with Soph, and this is the game that I don't have them. From here, the game will kick off in 3 phases, but I really think of it as kind of 4. The initial deployment / air attacks phase usually lasts for about the first 2 minutes, but that you can actually account for quite a bit of kill death scoring as you and the other team go head to head in the air, or you try to bait their air units into your anti-air coverage. This can be a lot of fun, and it's usually the time in the game where you'll see the most air units. After this, usually one side's air units are more or less destroyed, and you got to wait 10 minutes or so for them to come back. From here, the game rolls into 3 formal phases. Each phase is scored based on your destruction or kill death ratio and the amount of territory you hold. In this case, you can see it's phase 1. So you see you can earn up to 3 points for KD and up to 3 points total for capturing terrain. As the game goes on, in phase 2, each one of those markers is then worth 2 points. And then in phase 3, each one of those markers is worth 3 points for a total of 18 points available in the 3rd phase. This game is designed to encourage long play and comebacks. And so just because you have a rough start doesn't mean that you can't fight back into the game by making some good late pushes. 15 victory points. We came back and won it. Are you kidding me, dude?
How did that even happen?
And that's it. You've just played your first game of Broken Arrow. You've gotten through it. And now what do? You go straight back into the deck builder, because like with most of us, you probably identified like, oh man, I got this unit, but it didn't do what I needed it to do. So I'm going to swap it out for something else. And I think that is a good half of the fun of this game, is customizing the deck to exactly what you want and then building a new one and starting over with that process. Finally, there are a few things I wanted to highlight before we get out of here. If you've played other Milsim RTSs like Wargame or Warno, there are some key differences here. In this game, when a unit is destroyed, that just delays how long until you can bring it back out on the field. It's not like Wargame where if you lose something, it's gone for the entire battle. Because of that respawn ability, the game encourages you to play with a handful of really well-designed units rather than a large army based around throwing cheap units at the enemy to determine where their high-value targets are and then snuffing those out. Sometimes that can be frustrating because you feel like, oh, I just killed all those guys, M1 Abrams, and then 5 minutes later, more of them are coming at you. But it does allow you to focus on doing a couple things really, really well. From a destruction point of view, this game is all about trades, right? So airplanes are usually pretty expensive. Most of the airplanes that I've seen cost about 300 or 400 points or manpower to come onto the field, whereas a Patriot Pack 2 is 180. So if that Patriot kills one airplane before it dies, it is more than double paid for its destruction score. Keep that in mind when you're planning your pushes. Sometimes it can be really valuable to pull units back to either heal them or pull them off the battlefield entirely. And that is a totally different mechanic from some of the other RTSs. In this game, you can hit B to have your units drive back to base. For airplanes, you have to do this before they run out of fuel, otherwise the airplane will just crash. But for ground units, or especially resupply, once the unit has fulfilled its purpose, you can actually send it back for a refund. If the unit is at full health, you'll get a full refund. If it's at partial health, you'll get a partial refund. This allows you to keep only what you need on the battlefield at a time and maintain a little bit of reserve to deal with crises or enemy pushes. And that's the last thing here. In some RTSs, you don't want to float a lot of resources. You want to have as much out on the field as possible to apply pressure. In this game, your resource income decreases with how much you have on the field available to you. So in some cases, it might be okay to bank up a large number of resources to respond to an enemy attack or enemy push, or to build for your own counterattack to support your teammates. Sometimes it's nice to just have a reserve so that when a teammate calls for support, whether helicopters or anti-air or anti-artillery, you can call that onto the field right away. All right. I know that was a lot, and we still just left a lot of things at wave tops. Trust me, I have a lot more planned coming out on this channel. We'll talk game mechanics, we'll talk armory, we'll talk deck construction very, very soon. Thank you for sticking with this one. If there's anything that I missed or anything that you'd like to see in a future video, please hit me in the comments below. Appreciate you all. Oh, also, if you want to see gameplay footage, I have been streaming my games to Twitch, so check that out. The channel link is in the description below. And with that, I think that's going to do it. We'll see y'all in the next one.